Hello, Fish Faithful. This is Marlins Daily on the Fan Arch Network. I am Kurt Semder, and we are coming to you here on the last Friday of August. And the Marlins had the day off yesterday, a much-needed day of rest ahead of what is one of the biggest road trips of the season for the Marlins. Not so much because of who they're playing, but because of the timing here in the season as the Marlins are making their wild card push. A push that they have seemingly been on since the All-Star break. And the Marlins right now, they sit here 4 games back behind San Diego in the wild card race entering the weekend. If it seems like Miami has been 3 or 4 or 5 games back in the wild card race for seemingly forever, that's because they have been. They've kind of been in this area, in this spot in the wild card race for the last month or so, haven't really been able to make up a significant amount of ground, but also haven't fallen so far back that they're out of it. So the Marlins sit here now, 28 games left in the season. They are, as I mentioned, 4 games back. And now they go on the road here for 7 games against a pair of teams that are below them in the standings and the Marlins need to take advantage of. We talked a little bit about this briefly yesterday, but 4 games now in Washington, followed by 3 games in Kansas City. These are, as I mentioned, a pair of teams that have worse records than the Marlins. The Nationals, the Marlins just swept them. They are 2-8 in their last 10 games. They are out of it, but still, playing hard, competing. So you can't take them lightly. And it's always difficult, no matter who you're playing, to get a 4-game sweep, especially on the road in their ballpark. But that being said, the Marlins have a chance here against the Nationals if they can to get all 4 of these games, win the last 7 against a team like the Nationals, and, kind of fatten up their record. Right now they're 68 and 66, 2 games over 500. You'd love to be 6 games over 500 heading into the next series. And there's no real reason to believe they can't do that. When you look at who's pitching in this series, the Marlins seemingly, we don't know what's going to happen with Jensen Junk just because he, pitched that 1 inning in the series finale against the Red Sox in relief. But it seems as though the Marlins have their pitching lined up well, at least for this series. Yuri Perez, who has been excellent, is going to start things off tonight. You have Sandy Alcantara and Jensen Jung going Saturday, Sunday, depending on how things play out here, what they decide to do. And then you probably are going back to Tyler Phillips on Monday. We'll see how they shake things out here. But Marlins have their pitching going. They got their guys in matchups against a team that they should beat. And then they go to Kansas City after that. Kansas City, a team that, yes, they just had a 9-game win streak snapped, but let's not forget they are last in the American League Central. They have not had a great season, and they are yet another team that the Marlins need to take advantage of. And the reason they need to take advantage is because we've talked about this. Their schedule after this is brutal. After this series, the Marlins have 21 games left. Okay, just 21 games left in the season. Only 3 of those games are against what you would consider to be non-contenders. And those are the 3 games they play at home against the Mets. There's games against the Cubs, there's games against the Dodgers, there's games against the Braves, the Diamondbacks, yes, the Padres. There's a big West Coast trip in there as well. The schedule maker is doing the Marlins no favors. But, in order for those games to matter, in order for the Marlins to still be in it at that point, they've got to do well on this 7-game trip. I mean, I don't normally say something like a team's got to go 6-1, but that's kind of what you expect if you think you're making the playoffs, especially with, as I mentioned, that extremely difficult stretch just lurking there and waiting for you after these 7 games. And the other part of this that the Marlins have to consider is, too, they have struggled on the road. We've talked about it. Their 26 road wins are the 3rd fewest in the National League. This is going to be a challenge. but I don't believe this is a challenge that they can't meet and a challenge they can't succeed at. If they don't, if they struggle through these 7 games, if they end up falling further behind in the wild card race, if we come out of these next 7 games and the Marlins are somehow 5-6 games back in the wild card race, then considering the way the schedule lines up for them, it's going to be very difficult for them to make up that ground. They need to make up ground right here. Win these games, hope that the Padres, hope that the Diamondbacks, the Phillies are gone, the Cubs are gone. We're looking at just that one last wild card spot now. Hope that they lose some games and hope that you can gain some ground right here because they need to do it right now. And they have some injuries they're dealing with. They've got some players back, but no excuses. 2 teams you're playing that you got to beat. And it all begins tonight in our nation's capital. Now, we talked a little bit about injuries there, and one of the big injuries that we were talking about as of late was regarding the team's pitching, Max Meyer, who has been out since the All-Star break, pretty much. He took that one start after the break, had a neck strain, hasn't been back since. Since then, he had a rib injury as he's been rehabbing here in South Florida. They had to give him a cortisone shot. And the latest update from Clayton McCullough was that Max has not yet been cleared to throw. That's not great news for a lot of reasons. Obviously, you want to get him back. It would tremendously help this rotation if they could get him back in there. Let's not forget, I know it's easy to forget because he hasn't been around for the last month, basically, but 9-1. He pitched over 111 innings, an ERA under 3, 121 strikeouts, an all-star. He was having a tremendous season for this team. And to lose him has put this team in a tough spot, and it's a tough spot that they have not been able to figure a way out of in regards to their rotation. It's why they're pitching those 2 bullpen games we've been talking about. And what concerns me is, as I mentioned before, just 28 games left in the season. If he hasn't begun throwing yet, you're talking about roughly 4 weeks left in the season. You're going to need at least a week, if not longer, to ramp back up to get ready to, be a starting pitcher to throw at least 5 innings. If he doesn't start throwing in the next week or so, Max Meyer's season could be over, which is something that seemed ridiculous at the All-Star break because, the team was taking every precaution they could with him. They were being careful. They didn't have him pitch in the All-Star game. They skipped his last start before the break. He still ended up getting hurt, and he hasn't pitched more than a couple of innings at the start of the second half of the season. And possibly at this point, if he hasn't started throwing yet, having him back as a starting pitcher on this team this season may be unrealistic. Now, the thought I have is Pete Fairbanks just went on the injured list. We don't know if he's going to be able to make it back at all in the month of September. Why don't the Marlins consider if Max Meyer is healthy enough, but there's not enough time to stretch him out to get him ready to be a starting pitcher once again, would the Marlins consider using Max Meyer as their closer for those last 2 weeks or so of the season? I think it'd be a great idea. He obviously has enough pitches. He's obviously effective enough. He has, just let him go out there and do his thing for an inning. It's not the worst idea in the world, I don't think. In fact, I think it's a pretty good idea. The one downside to it that I can see is if the Marlins actually do make the playoffs, then you haven't gotten Max Meyer ready to be a starting pitcher. The positive spin of that is, if the Marlins make the playoffs doing this, then they've got a closer for the playoffs in Max Meyer. And you'd be covered in a short series, I think, with Sandy, with Yuri, and with Jensen Junk for 1, 2, and 3. And then you start worrying, you can worry about this as you go forward. We all know the Marlins take it game by game anyway. But maybe that's the way to use Max Meyer if he's able to come back. And I hope he can come back because he had such a great first half of the season. You want to see him try to build on that. And what I don't think the Marlins can afford to do is have him start throwing in 2 weeks and hope that he can stretch himself back out so that he can come up and make 1, maybe 2 starts in the last week of the season. Especially considering how much the bullpen has been used and taxed and exhausted over the last couple of weeks. So maybe they think a little bit outside the box here. Maybe they type it into their Scout GPT system and see if maybe Max Meyer should be this team's closer, considering or taking into account the potential that Pete Fairbanks may not be able to come back in time. Just an idea, just a thought. But I hope Max comes back. I loved watching him pitch this season, and I hope we get a chance to see him pitch again this season for the team in some meaningful baseball games next month. And Max Meyer, obviously somebody who, with him going down, the Marlins didn't make any acquisitions of an additional starting pitcher at the trade deadline. Would have loved to have seen them do that, but they didn't. They made a bunch of trades at the deadline that we've talked about in depth here on the show. And I know a lot of people have been focusing on the Liam Hicks trade and, whether or not he should have been traded, whether or not the Marlins got good prospects back from Tampa, and so on and so forth. Did you see who hit a grand slam for the Rockies on Wednesday? It was our good friend Connor Norby. Connor Norby. You may remember Connor Norby, not just here on the Marlins, but he was the guy who they traded at the deadline to the Rockies. They got back relief pitcher Victor Vodnik. It was the one move that seemingly was adding someone for the stretch run. And my initial thought was, well, bad move, because here's a guy, just 26, still plenty of time to come into his own, and look what he's doing. That was my reaction anyway after this. When the trade first happened, I thought, like most of you, okay, they got a reliever, they traded somebody who's struggling. But Connor Norby, since being traded to the Rockies, and again, playing in Colorado, yeah, but since being traded to the Rockies, 42 at-bats, okay? Sitting .310. He's got an OPS of .980. 2 home runs, 9 RBI. 5 of them coming in that game on Wednesday against the Nationals. But he's also on an 11-game hitting streak. He's playing well. And could he help the Marlins right now? Absolutely. Do I think he'd be putting up these numbers if he was still on the Marlins right now? Absolutely not. I don't believe so. You know why? It's something I've talked about on the show about with other players. The Marlins wouldn't play him consistently. He wouldn't get to play every day. He'd be in when the matchup suited them. He'd be in once or twice and then out for 2 games and then back in for 1 and then out again. It's not how you develop young players. But that point aside, Norby's been great. However, let's look at Victor Vodnik for a second. 8 appearances with the Marlins, an ERA of 3.12. He's only given up 3 earned runs, and those 3 earned runs came in his first 2 appearances with the team. Since then, he has not given up a single run. He's gone 6 straight outings now without giving up a run. That's over the span of 5 2/3 innings. He's come in and held it down in some very important spots. He's been very good for the Marlins as a reliever. So what you have to ask yourself is, what's more valuable to this team right now, the way things have gone, or what's more valuable to them for the stretch run? A good relief pitcher or a young bat like Connor Norby, who was not performing here at the time? I contend that Vodnik is actually more valuable to the team right now than Norby is. And going forward, if Norby develops into the player that the Marlins thought he would be when the season started, but obviously lost faith in, then you'll look back on the trade and think maybe not the best move. But, right now, I think a lot of times we get caught up in who won the trade, who lost the trade. And the question I'm asking you is who won the trade here, of course. I think both teams won the trade. And that's a sign of a good trade. Both teams should win the trade. The Marlins got a much-needed boost in their bullpen with a reliever that has been more than reliable for them now. And the Rockies got a young bat who is starting to show signs of being a more than effective Major League Baseball player. And he's coming through with some big hits, some consistency, as I said, an 11-game hitting streak. I think both teams won the trade, which is a good thing. It's a good sign, and it's okay. It doesn't always have to be the Marlins won the trade, the Marlins lost the trade. I think both teams won this one. And there's obviously another month left of the season before we even, and a lot more baseball obviously to be played before we figure out who really got the best of it. But I think the trade was kind of a push. And I think both teams got what they needed at the time they needed it here this season. Speaking of things that you need at a certain time of season, it is almost the end of August, which means we are going right into September call-ups. And, with the September call-ups coming up, the roster is expanding by 2. The Marlins having some options of what they're going to do here. Okay. Before I get into this, let me just say this. I believe De Los Santos will get called back up for no other reason other than he is already on this team's 40-man roster. There was a report that came out, and I think it's pretty consistent, and it's consistent not just with the Marlins, with a lot of other teams, that, teams are being very careful with who they call up and who they bring up and who they add to their 40-man roster ahead of next season because of the possibility of a lockout, because if there is a lockout, then players who are on your 40-man roster can essentially have no contact with the team. They can't work out at the facilities. They can't talk to training staff. They can't do anything. But if the team is players not on your 40-man roster, they're essentially a minor leaguer, they can they can work out. They can do basically what they would do during spring training, playing minor league games if they have them. You know what I'm saying? They can continue their development. So teams are being very careful because if you call someone up for a short time here at the end of the season, you may end up losing some time developing them next year if there's a lockout. So I think the Marlins will probably call up players who are already on their 40-man roster unless they are deciding to actually do something bold, take someone off their 40-man roster because they'd have to do that, and call up one of the guys I'm going to talk about right here. And top of the list is someone we've talked about already before, and that's Cam Cannarella, who is tearing it up in Jacksonville. He since getting called up to Jacksonville, since going to AAA, 282, 801 OPS, 10 stolen bases, home run, 5 RBI, small sample size, getting it done. Just getting it done. He plays the outfield. He plays center field. He could take Jacob Marcy's spot. He's a lefty bat just like Marcy is. I think he's your best option. I think he's ready. I don't think they'll do it for the reasons I talked about before regarding the lockout. I don't think they're going to want to risk losing him being able to continue his development next season if there's a lockout. The same goes for Jonathan Long, who I really think they thought they were going to bring up, or at least thought they should have considered bringing up when Kyle Stowers went down with his injury. And since getting him from the Cubs, his numbers have been okay. Just hitting under 250, decent OPS, home run, 7 RBI, not a ton, but he's playing left field, playing first base, getting the hang of it. He is okay. And now that Stowers is back, and if you decide to bring De Los Santos up, who plays basically the same positions, I don't think that it is going to happen for Jonathan Long this season for the same reason I talked about with the development. So I would love to see both of those guys called up, but my gut tells me it's not going to happen. The interesting candidate for me is Kemp Alderman, because he plays essentially the same positions Stowers, Griffin Conine do, outfield, first base. What I like about him, and his numbers are good. They're comparable to some of the other guys we talked about here. but he's been at AAA a little bit longer. He is a right-handed bat. This team is left-handed bat heavy. They need a righty bat that can give them a little bit of pop. They need a righty bat that can get on base and somebody who can help them against left-handed pitching. If I was going to make a move on the 40-man roster and switch somebody out and bring somebody else up, Kemp Alderman might be a good option. Again, none of these guys I mentioned are on the 40-man roster as of right now, so the Marlins would have to remove someone from their 40-man in order to make it happen. And they've been very hesitant to do that. They had an open spot after the deadline, but they filled it up with a waiver pickup of a pitcher. Yeah. Again, I mentioned all these guys. The Marlins might just go pitching too. The bullpen needs help. I know that. The rotation needs help. I'm just not sure the help is where they need is at AAA. We've already seen a couple of guys come up, so they wouldn't have to add them additionally. But just some ideas, just some thoughts when the rosters expand next week. So that's where we're at right now. Wrapping up this last week of August. We're going to head into September next week. We're going to take a look back at the National Series, which when we get back here on Monday, we'll be going into the series finale. Don't forget, Sunday's game is that early Peacock game, so it's an early start on Sunday. And go get them, guys. This is it. The ball is in your court. The matchups are there for you. The teams that you're playing are teams you should beat. Go get them. Go have a good weekend, and make up some ground in the wild card race and keep things interesting as we make our way into September. Been a great week with everybody here on Marlins Daily. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking and subscribing and commenting. And I will see you next week, hopefully again, with more good news from this team as a big weekend series gets underway tonight. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you on Monday.